Hi, Friendship West. The Be Made Whole Counseling Center announces Reclaiming Mental Health for Women and Families. This exciting new grant will provide personal counseling, mentoring, classes, and I like to say layers of love to help women connect with their power and purpose. Beginning on March 14th for 8 weeks, the first group will get started. If you live in the city of Dallas, have been impacted by COVID, that's all of us, and if you know you deserve a good job, you're ready to move on up, check us out. We've got laptops, hotspots, technology, books, and everything is online, so it's safe. If you want some power, some healing, and financial breakthrough, please join us. Applications are now available online. Please contact Ashanti Davis by email at adavis@friendshipwest.org, and she'll get you connected. Thanks.
What's up, fabulous family of faith? Did you know you can make charitable donations to your church while you shop on Amazon? That's right. Amazon Smile is a way that you can support Friendship West every time you shop with Amazon. You'll find the same amazing Amazon you know and love with the added bonus that Amazon Smile would donate a portion of the eligible purchase price to Friendship West at no additional cost to you. All you have to do is visit smile.amazon.com and sign in with your Amazon credentials. Select Friendship West Baptist Church Dallas as your charity of choice and start shopping. Remember to check out smile.amazon.com to generate your donations to your church. For those of you who like to shop via the computer, here's a tip. Add the bookmark to make it easier to shop at smile.amazon.com. And if you're like me, you like using your app on your phone, simply open the Amazon shopping app, navigate to the main menu, that's the 2 bars, tap on the settings, and then select Amazon Smile. Once you do that, you can select Friendship West Baptist Church as your charity of choice. Then follow the on-screen instructions to turn on Amazon Smile in the mobile app. Once Amazon Smile has been activated in your app, your future eligible app purchases will generate donations for Friendship West. Unfortunately, the tablet app is not yet supported, so use your phone or your computer. So remember, smile.amazon.com to generate donations for your church.
Oh, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord at Friendship West Baptist Church. Listen, the reopening is on and popping, and we are excited. We can't even hide it that you're coming home. You're coming back home. So we want to make sure that, again, we're safe and responsible, and we keep you healthy and well. So here's what we're asking you to do. On Mondays, beginning at 3:00 p.m., we will open our website to register for worship that following Sunday. Everybody has to register because, of course, we're having to, cap how many people can come in to the worship auditorium for the worship experience. And so I'm asking you, as much as I don't like to do this, it's for us to look out for us. So please register beginning at 3:00 p.m. on Monday. If you don't have access to a website or you need some help, call the church, 972-228-5200, and we will walk you through the process. Please understand that the registration process closes at 3:00 p.m. on Wednesday. And so Monday, 3:00 until Wednesday at 3:00. Register for our worship experience, and we will look forward to seeing you. Please recognize that we're going to maintain social distancing. We're insisting that everyone wear a mask. We're going to be free in the spirit, and yet respect in the spirit protocols that will keep all of us safe. And so I'm excited. I can't wait to see you. You got to know that we are prayerfully planning worship experiences that will be on and popping. At the same time, they're going to be safe because we're determined to keep everyone healthy in the name of Jesus, because that's faith that works. God bless you. I can't wait to see you.
on, come on, come on, come on. Y'all ready to worship? We serve a great big God. Here we go. Say, oh, woo, oh, hey, oh. One more time, can we say it? Can y'all say it with us? Hey, oh, yeah, oh, woo. We gonna have fun. Oh, I believe. Come on, say that it's my season.
That it's my season.
Yeah. And I believe.
And I believe.
Yeah, that it's my time. Say,
that it's my time.
it's my time.
It's my time.
And I can feel it.
And I can feel it.
Come on, tell them. Say that there's breakthrough.
Breakthroughs in the room.
Woo! Anticipating.
Anticipating.
That God is getting ready to move right now. You believe it?
God's getting ready to move. For I know my God is working a miracle just for me. And it's gonna be big.
Do y'all believe that tonight? I said, do you believe it tonight? Hey, that it's gonna be.
That it's gonna be big.
And I need you to position yourself right where you are. Come on, tell them, say, God's gonna
Open the windows of heaven. Pour me out a blessing.
Won't be
room to contain it. Can't even try to explain it. 'Cause it's gonna be big.
get ready, because God is gonna blow our minds. Say,
God's about to blow my mind.
oh, say, God's
gonna open the windows of heaven. Pour me out a blessing. Won't be room to contain it. Can't try to explain it. 'Cause it's gonna be big.
God's about to blow my mind.
God's about to blow my mind.
Hey, say, and it's gonna be.
Big.
Do y'all really believe that? I dare you to declare and decree tonight that it's gonna be.
That it's gonna be big.
Yes, it is. Oh, can we stay right there, right? And it's gonna be.
And it's gonna be big.
Said it's gonna be.
Big.
Said it's gonna be.
Big.
Your promotion is.
Big.
Yeah, said it's gonna be.
Big.
Finances are big.
Big.
Hey, big.
Big.
Oh, big. I proclaim it tonight that it's
Big.
whatever you need is gonna be.
Big.
I need your healing to be.
Big.
You gotta believe it. You gotta receive it. Hey, big.
Big.
God's about to blow my mind.
God's about to blow my mind.
Hey, God's gonna
Open the windows of heaven.
pour.
Pour me out a blessing.
One.
Won't be room to contain it.
Woo.
Can't even try to explain
I can't even try to explain
It's gonna be big.
God's about to blow my mind.
God's about to blow my mind.
Hey, and it's gonna be.
And it's gonna be big.
Hallelujah. Thank you, God.
Blow your mind, and when God blows your mind, it is always what? Big, exceeding abundantly above all you can ask or imagine. So listen, God's about to blow your mind tonight. Tonight is going to be absolutely powerful. I hope that you've already liked, subscribed, and shared what's about to take place tonight. This is another edition of Theology Matters. And yes, it does. Theology matters. Please, you got to know that. What you think about God matters. And sadly, we've had so much in history to reflect that there were those whose theology was toxic, and as a consequence, it stained their sociology. And of course, they had an abhorrent anthropology because of their poison psychology. I could go on, but the bottom line is theology matters. Theology matters, and we in this country, sadly, too often have been victimized by bad theology. And one of the things that we try to do every first Wednesday of the month is do all we can to flush out of our systems that toxic theology that in so many instances has poisoned our psyche because of white Jesus. Anyway, very seriously, I'm really excited tonight to welcome our guest. Our special guest is someone I have long appreciated, admired from afar. His ministry is absolutely a model for what ministry ought to look like. One of the things that was said, sadly, about the black church is that the black church was absent from the front lines of the movement for Black Lives, Black Lives Matter, and I can promise you that this brother was not just on the front lines, but providing theological framing for it, and he continues to do it. And so I'm excited to welcome to Friendship West my frat brother. I'm excited to welcome to Friendship West a scholar, a brilliant gift to the body of Christ. I'm excited to welcome to Friendship West a preacher par excellence, a professor. I'm talking about one who is married, academia and anointing with Africanity, unapologetically. The brother's bad like that. And so I am too hyped. As a matter of fact, please welcome Friendship West. Welcome to all of us in the Friendship West Everywhere community. My brother, Dr. Earle. And let me just say this, PhD, okay, not DD, not DMIN, I'm talking about PhD. And I'm in a program right now. Bro, I got so much respect for you now. I mean, I used to have respect, but Jesus, this PhD ain't no joke. So man, listen, we're glad to have Dr. Earle Fisher with us. He is the pastor of the great Abyssinia Baptist Church there in Memphis, Tennessee. No, it's the blackest church in Memphis. And so, man, we are so glad to have you. We warmly welcome you to this edition of Theology Matters. Again, everybody make sure you like, subscribe, share, because you want everybody to get in on this conversation with this mighty, brilliant, bad brother right here. We're going to be talking about his book. His book has just lit my fire, because it is lit. And so I'm super excited that we have Dr. Earle the Pearl with us. He did a powerful piece on Reverend Albert Kleeg and the Black prophetic tradition. Just an amazing work. And I just want to quickly say, get it. Okay, whatever else you do, get this book. I want to show it to you on my phone. Here it is right here. Yeah, there it is right there. There it is right there. Man, this thing is so hot. The Reverend Albert Kleeg Jr. and the Black Prophetic Tradition, a reintroduction of the Black Messiah. This book is not only brilliantly written, but so insightful. And Earle, for me, it captures the essence, the monumental, game-changing ministry of one who, even as James Hal Cone was shaking up the schools of theology around the country, there was this Albert Kleeg Jr. who was basically shaking up not just schools of theology, but he was shaking up ecclesiology, shaking up the church, shaking up the community, the nation. And unfortunately, if I were to take a survey right now and poll and ask people, how many of you know the name Albert Kleeg Jr.? Sad reality is not enough. And so tonight, allow us to reintroduce the Reverend Albert Kleeg Jr. Earle, let me say this right quick, and then we just gonna jump right into this, man. I married my wife in 1987. She was from Detroit. Met her in 86, went up to Detroit in 86, and everyone was telling me, you got to go by the shrine of the Black Madonna. And man, let me tell you something. Since 86, I've made a pilgrimage all the time to the shrine. And so what you've done is absolutely vital, it's necessary, and I just want to thank you and welcome my brother to this edition of Theology Matters.
Man, Freddie, Fab Five Freddie, my dear brother, man, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. You know, we've already texted back and forth saying how much we wish this was in person, but we thank God for theology and technology. Salute to you. Salute to what I call the blackest church in Texas, you know, the blackest church in Dallas and Fort Worth area. Friendship West is definitely a model of ministry. You are definitely a OG, somebody who's been on the front lines and forerunning for, you know, black liberation, black theology, and black church and black spirituality. So it's an honor to be on here, man. All of those kind words, you set the bar too high for me, so please be kind to me tonight. Thank you so much.
Whatever, man. I know better. I know better, man. We're honored to have you. Thank you so much. So, man, let's just talk about who is Albert Kleeg. And I want you to even give the backstory. What made you, and it's in the book, I know, but what made you, as you're doing your academic, you know, climb, what arrested your attention about Albert Kleeg? So who is he? And give us the backstory as how you came to write about him.
Right. So, you know, he is, according to PBS and some other people of the 1960s and 70s who were commentating, some would say he was the most controversial minister, not just in Detroit, but in the country.
Yeah.
You know, he definitely a forerunner for black religion and black revolutionary action, black political praxis. He is the person who coins the term black liberation theology. So like you, Doc, I am somebody who considered myself, especially coming out of seminary, to be relatively familiar with the primary personalities in black liberation theology. I knew about James Cone. I would have called myself a student of Cone. I knew about, you know, J.D. Otis Roberts and Dwight Hopkins.
Yeah.
You know, J. Alfred Smith, right?
Yeah.
Get some love in there. But I didn't hear about Albert Kleeg when I was in seminary at all. I mean, never heard the name. I'm from Benton Harbor, Michigan. You know, that's 90 miles east of Chicago, about 140, 150 miles west of Detroit. But, you know, I'm a Michigander.
Yeah.
Was in Michigan the first 20 years of my life before I came to Lemoyne College in Memphis to play basketball and all of that stuff. I didn't hear anything about the brother. So what happened was, and how I stumbled upon him, was I was teaching a course. It was a course that I was constructing at Rose College in Memphis, and it was called Gangster Theology. It's something that you and I could appreciate, right? It's about how gangsters were constructing their idea of God. Think about folks like Proposition Joe and Avon Barksdale and all them folks in the wire, how they met in the church, right?
I love it.
You know, so all of those types of personalities, I was trying to think through what kind of theology they constructed. And so I was putting a syllabus together. I reached out to one of my mentors, Dr. Randall Bailey, and I said, Doc, what kind of resources should I use? This was like 2012. So I had been at Abyssinian for about a year, and I talk about some of this in the preface of the book, as you mentioned.
Right.
So I talked to Dr. Bailey. Dr. Bailey asked me to read William Jones's Is God a White Racist?
Right.
I read that, and he is challenging all of the forerunners for black liberation theology. And so I get to his chapter entitled Black Christian Nationalism, and I'm like, what is this? Right. And then he starts talking about this guy that I had never heard of, Albert Kleeg Jr. I'm like, who is this? It's a guy out of Detroit. I was like, okay, Michigan, I get it. And then the Shrine of the Black Madonna, it's like I had heard that phrase before, but was not necessarily sure what it was about. And then the more I read about what William Jones said Kleeg said and was doing, I was like, man, I just said that last week at Abyssinian.
Yeah.
Or, man, it sounds like something I either have said or something that I would say. And then I got frustrated. I'm like, why didn't I hear about this in seminary? If this guy is contributing this type of thought, material, practice, framework, like, why didn't I get introduced to him? And I can say more about that in our conversation, but the long story less long, I put him on the shelf because I knew I was entering into the PhD program. And one of your professors, somebody who we share in common as a colleague, and, you know, Dr. Andre Johnson had already set the standard for me in terms of how you engage personalities at the intersection of rhetoric, race, and religion, as he coined it. And he did with Bishop Henry McNeil Turner what I thought I would be able to do with Albert Kleeg. So that's how I got on to him, and that's how I ended up tackling some of his wonderful theological content in the program I was in.
Yeah, shout out to Dr. Andre Turner. The piece on Henry McNeil Turner is a classic. And, I mean, you could really say that
McNeil Turner is the is the rootage, and our man Albert Kleeg Jr. is the fruitage. So yeah, powerful. So my question then is, because I'm feeling you on that, bro. I also, in all of my, going to school and all that stuff, I mean, I didn't hear about Albert Kleeg Jr. When I get to, Detroit, and, they're telling me about, going to the Shrine of the Black Madonna, I'm like, well, who is this? And why did I never hear of him in Detroit? You think C.L. Franklin, Fred Sampson, Charles Adams, you can call the roll, great preachers in Detroit. But we're not hearing of this brother. What's up with that? As impactful as he was, why do you think he's a hidden figure?
So in the more recent, reflections that I've had about it, I think about how, Malcolm wasn't as popular 20 years ago as he is today. King was not necessarily popular in 68 when he was assassinated. You don't get a King Day until the mid 80s or something like that.
Thank you.
And so I think some of it is just that familiarity in the span of time. Even though the more you peel back the layers and do the research, people were talking about Kleeg. Matter of fact, Malcolm said that he was telling every Christian in Detroit that he knew that they need to go to Albert Kleeg's church. Most folks don't know that. You talk about C.L. Franklin, man, me and Pastor R. Janae Pitts Murdoch have been musing over an opportunity to write like a co-edited, a co-authored essay on the relationship between Kleeg and C.L. Franklin, because it's fascinating to say the least.
Doc, I can only imagine.
I think the primary reason he is not more well known is because he does not fit the model or the standard of Christian preacher. He is much more militant, much more revolutionary, much more Afrocentric, at a time where most of that stuff was illegible or even today is misunderstood. So it's easy to talk about Malcolm, but dismiss Malcolm religiously. Oh, that's a Muslim. It's easy to talk about King's religion and disconnect it from his activism, or vice versa. And King is cool because he's a middle of the road kind of Christian theologically, and endorses or embraces most of, if not the vast majority of white theological or evangelical tenets in terms of his public persona. There was things that he thought privately that people have researched and discovered. But for the most part, his notions of Jesus and reconciliation and love, all of that stuff is cool. This Kleeg guy, he disrupts that because he's as militant and revolutionary as Malcolm and as Christian as Martin.
Come on.
So I think that's the way that, people just didn't want to have to deal with that complicated and textured theology, and definitely didn't want more Black people to be inspired by it. So I think that's why you don't see them in the mainstream. But as you said at the opening, myself, and I consider Dr. Jawanza Eric Clark to be the foremost scholar on Albert Kleeg. But when I think about some of the scholars who have been writing about Kleeg over the years, our other frat brother, Raphael Warnock, has a section on Kleeg in his book, The Divided Mind of the Black Church. He calls what Kleeg was radical pastoral praxis. He is a guy out of New Jersey, Dr. Wendell McWilliams, who does something on the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church as a denomination. There are all kind of people who are reclaiming some of Kleeg's stuff, and I'm glad to be in that number.
Well, you're definitely doing it, and you've done a brilliant job of it. You have a statement in the book, and I want to just quote you and let that frame the question. You peered into the window of the Black Power movement. What implications do you discern given the content, context, and form of the Black Messiah for today? Because again, and go ahead and just share with the audience the whole concept of the Black Messiah. And again, what implications does that speak to us today?
Yeah, man. Look, so you being the rhetorician that you are, the Black Messiah is a double entendre in a lot of ways. Even in my title, it's a double entendre. So you have the reference to the historical Jesus, who was socially, politically, religiously, and revolutionary, ordained and anointed by God to carry out the mission of liberation for his people. So that makes him the Messiah, right? Or the Messiah in Hebrew, the anointed one. That's the black Messiah. He is existentially, ontologically, metaphysically, and experientially black. The other thing about the black Messiah is that's the book of sermons that Kleeg published. It was 20 sermons that he was preaching from the Shrine of the Black Madonna during the Black Power and Civil Rights era. So I took a couple of those sermons. I initially, Freddie, thought I was going to do the whole book until, you know how it is in the PhD program. You got this big grand idea, and you do everything at first, then you're going to do half of that, and then you're going to do half of that, and then you're going to do a quarter of that. So I ended up with 3 sermons that I kind of looked at more closely out of the book. So the Black Messiah is the book that Kleeg published in 1969. So this is before Cone's Black Theology and Black Power. I know we'll come back to some of that other stuff, but that's before that. So this is, in essence, what I would call like the Black Liberation Theology Treatise. It is a bunch of sermons that somebody was preaching over a span of time, preaching to Black people, preaching about Black religion, Black faith, Black experience, Black radical politics. I think it's the prima facie case for Black liberation theology, especially what it looks like in the congregational context. So it's the book of sermons, but it's also a reference to the historical Jesus in contrast to who I've heard you preach about, and you even mentioned earlier today, that we suffer from, which is the white evangelical theology or the white Jesus.
Sadly and sickly so. So what you do, again, brilliantly in the book is you set the context. This is Detroit, 1967, 1968, and he preaches some, I guess you said 20 sermons on the Black Messiah. Just remind us afresh what's happening in Detroit, 67, 68.
Man, Detroit was and is, one of the most militant cities in the country.
Come on.
What was happening around the time of some of these sermons? So the 20 sermons were not all preached like in the year or two, right? 67, 68. They would have been preached according to what the members of the Shrine have said over the span of maybe a little bit longer, maybe 5 to 7 years, maybe even 7 to 10 years. Some of these sermons would be what we would call his horse sermons or his sticks, his staple sermons that if you went out, you would probably hear one rendition of it or another. Sermons that he might have revisited once every year. Sermons like an epistle to Stokely, which is one of the ones that I try to dig into. But what's happening in Detroit is the Black Power Rebellion. What's happening in Detroit are the riots or the revolutionary actions and the resistance movements to police brutality that we see in cinematic form more recently in the movie Detroit, the stuff about the Algiers Motel. I told this story a couple times. Like when the movie first came out and I was sitting up there listening to some of the previews, I was leaning over to my wife, Denise. I was like, Algiers Motel, that sounds familiar for some reason. I don't know what. And some said, go grab the book. I grabbed the Black Messiah and I opened it up. The first sermon in there, he's talking about the People's Tribunal. Freddie, this is Kleeg organizing like a mock trial for the police officers in the Shrine of the Black Madonna. You got the most notable people in Detroit in his congregation or in the sanctuary performing this mock trial. So you got Black lawyers, you got Black judges, Rosa Parks is there, Coleman Young is there. So Kleeg is doing some revolutionary stuff, breaking down the walls of division insofar as what's happening within the congregational context or within the church and what's happening in the broader community or on the street corners. So you got those riots and rebellions, not just in Detroit, you got them in Los Angeles, you got them in New York, you got them in Newark, New Jersey, and he is preaching about what's happening all throughout there. But Detroit remains one of the most militant places, which is why Malcolm was so instrumental in Detroit. And Malcolm and Kleeg were very good friends, so much so Kleeg ends up being one of the founding members of the Organization of Afro-American Unity that Malcolm founded.
That's powerful. My brother-in-law, Lonnie Peake, was a part of that tribunal in Detroit, and so that's some rich history right there. You do something in the book that, again, I just find very intriguing. I really appreciate. You put James Cone again, the father of black liberation theology, in conversation with Kleeg, even though Kleeg embodied and institutionalized in his church ministry and community outreach and activism what Cone was writing about. Cone doesn't say a whole lot about Kleeg, and you point that out. And so just kind of share with us what Cone missed and what Kleeg has to say to the father of black theology, the late, great Dr. James Howe Cone.
Well, I'm so glad you asked this question, Freddie, because, you know, we could talk about it, Doc, in some ways that other audiences or maybe even other institutions and individuals couldn't understand or appreciate. So first, let me say, I don't concede Cone to be the father of black liberation theology.
I feel you.
I consider him to be the most notable, but I also consider him to be one of the forerunners for black liberation theology. Again, Kleeg is the one that coins the term. Not only that, you know, you talk about what I say about what Cone, you said misses. I don't think he missed it at all. He intentionally did not include it.
Wow.
In black theology and black power, Cone clearly knows who Kleeg is.
He does.
He's clearly been influenced by Kleeg. He says as much in his last book before he transitioned into the ancestral realm. The book is called I Said I Wasn't Gonna Tell Nobody.
That's right.
Cone goes into detail about how much Kleeg's theology and pastoral leadership influenced him. Cone was at the shrine so often, according to Mbayu Chewy, who is the pastor at Shrine Number 1, as they would call it in Detroit, and Bishop Kamathi Nelson, who is Kleeg's successor as the Jeramogi, or the head patriarch of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. They said Cone used to be in the shrine so much, especially midweek during the Bible studies, taking what they call copious notes. They said he did this. I didn't put this in the book. They said he was in there so much, taking so many notes, and he was so quiet, nobody knew who he was. They thought he was a federal informant.
Wow. Wow.
So clearly he knows about it. And in black theology and black power, he writes one sentence about Kleeg.
Yeah.
He said something about, you know, Kleeg was one of the more militant ministers. And the next sentence, he starts talking about the Nation of Islam and Malcolm.
Right. I remember.
So in my references and conversations with people who knew Cone, who know Kleeg, or knew Kleeg and know Cone, they said it was basically about one or two things. One, Cone trying to independently establish himself within the academy, whereby Kleeg really had no aspirations for a professorship or a tenure track position, and really wasn't trying to engage in a lot of highbrow academic theological discourse. As you said, for Kleeg, it was more about ecclesiology. Kleeg wanted to organize institutions and thought that the black church was the premier institution to house the black liberation movement or the black power and civil rights movements. Also, I think that for Cone wants to appeal to an audience that Kleeg is not necessarily interested in appealing to. Now, Kleeg and Cone got a wonderful relationship, or a peculiar relationship. Kleeg calls Cone the apostle to the Gentiles.
Wow.
He's saying that Cone's primary audience is white academicians. That's not Kleeg's primary audience. And I think you and I, Dr. Haynes, can talk a lot about how so many of our colleagues and friends who study black theology, who write about black theology or womanist theology, or many of the theologies that engage in liberationist practices and philosophies, are not housed in a religious institution or congregational context.
Say that.
And so it might sound good, but how you gonna make that live with Grandma Betty?
Come on.
Or Uncle John John, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Kleeg was much more committed to that than Cone was. It does not mean that Cone is not valuable. I find him irreplaceable.
No question.
It does mean that, as some have said, what Cone provided was not necessarily a theology of liberation. It was a theology of legitimization, where Cone made theology, black theology, legitimate as a field of study in the academy. Kleeg made Black liberation theology the literal manifestation of Black religion in real time in a congregational context like Detroit.
Yeah, brilliantly said, man. I love that. So Kelly Brown Douglas does a powerful piece on the Black Christ.
Yes.
Of course, Kleeg is talking about the Black Messiah.
Yes.
Tell us about rhetorically, because that's one of the things that you do, of course. And again, shout out to the great Andre Johnson and Frank Thomas. One of the things that you do in just an amazing way is you, again, explore that intersection of race, rhetoric, and religion. And so Kelly Brown Douglas, again, writes about the Black Christ, Kleeg about the Black Messiah. So rhetorically speaking, what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, and let me also say, too, that Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas, who I think I'm going to be on the panel with later this month, actually has a section in the Black Christ on Kleeg.
She does,
where she said Kleeg's theology was most appealing out of all of the manifestations of Black liberation theology. Kleeg's was the most appealing to young African-American, especially young African-American men in Detroit. But the difference, from my vantage point, the rhetorical difference, and I would even say theological and substantive difference of a Black Christ and a Black Messiah is not much different than what Jackie Grant cited when she said it's white women's Christ and Black women's Jesus, right?
Right.
So Christ definitely has much more of a spiritual or religious connotation. And Messiah has much more of a political or revolutionary connotation. Let me explain. We both know they reference this idea of the anointed one.
Right.
Whereby in the New Testament, this term Christos is one that speaks to individual salvation as we understand. But the term Messiah speaks to, and Aubrey Hendricks was on this exact same program talking about some of this stuff a couple of weeks ago.
That's right.
Messiah in the Old Testament or in the Hebrew Bible is about communal liberation.
Come on.
There is no individual salvation without communal liberation. So I think the Black Messiah is the one that is the more unapologetic, political, revolutionary religious leader who embodies the will of God and enacts it such that it brings to fruition what Kleeg would call the Black nation, but also brings to fruition what we now call today Black liberation. This Black Christ is definitely one that takes into account the realities of Black people. It's the realities of Black people from the standpoint of piety and right standing and righteousness in ways that give us access to a divine afterlife. So I think that's the significant rhetorical difference between, you know, the Black Christ and the Black Messiah.
Yeah, that's good, Doc. So, Doc, as you know, rhetoric, the term has taken some hits, you know, through the years. And, you know, again, your professor left, Andre Johnson, so many are really trying to help us understand it ain't a bad word. Rhetoric is not a bad thing. So help us understand why the study of rhetoric is so important in understanding religion.
Yeah, I really would, on the one hand, just refer people to my pastor, right? Like Frank Anthony Thomas, I think, has done probably most of the heavy lifting in reclaiming the need for people in religious studies to understand the nature of the role and the functions of rhetoric. I mean, this is what we do on Sundays. Now, here's what I try to add to that in like the second chapter of my book. So obviously, Frank talks about the role of rhetoric and religion and the way that they overlap. He says all theology is inherently theological and rhetorical at the same time. Andre builds upon that. Valerie Bridgman, my fondest mentor, builds upon that. What I tried to add to that was how the traditional fields of communication and rhetoric and religious studies are both so white that you disregard the contribution of religious rhetoric and especially African American religious rhetoric.
Say that.
So rhetoric proper is so focused on this Greco-Roman white European period. That's where people get the bad rap of rhetoric. It's rhetoric as is associated with persuasion, even if that means persuasion without substance or integrity. But if you look at rhetoric or communication from the Afrocentric standpoint, it's about agency. It's about nomo. It's about the creation of things. It's like in the beginning was the word and the word was God, or in the beginning God spoke and said something, right? Like those are ways in the African context we would understand rhetoric. But religious studies tends to dismiss rhetoric as if it's just strategies of manipulation, and rhetoric tends to dismiss religion as if it's erroneous and anti-intellectual. Neither of these are true. And in order for us, especially within the Black faith community and the Black faith context, to make the most of our efforts to reclaim a radical and revolutionary religion and enact it in a community to bring about a more just, equitable society, we have to pay attention to both so that we can be more intentional in what we're trying to do.
Good, good. Perfect segue into my next question. On page 90, you make, again, insightful, brilliant statement about how the negotiation of sacred space and rhetorical strategies with respect to how to use Black power as a tool of religious empowerment was an uphill battle for most congregations. And for me, that's real problematic because given the nature of the birth of Christianity, the prophetic tradition out of which Jesus came, and the liberating life and work of Jesus of Nazareth, the hood, my question is, why is that the case? I mean, Jesus is straight revolutionary. He's not in bed with empire. And yet you make the statement that for the Black church to embrace this kind of radicality, it's been an uphill battle. And you said it was for Kleeg. Why do you think that is?
Same reason it is for you. I almost said, I almost talked like we were talking over coffee, right? Like Negro, the same reason it is for you. The same reason it is for you is because generally our churches have, and this is historic, right? Our churches have been constituted in a way that is more closely aligned with white evangelical theology than it is Black liberation theology. So it's a tough sell to talk about Black power stuff because Black power is so disruptive to a white power structure. White evangelical theology so closely tied to white supremacy, you can't tell them apart. And so the reason your type of preaching has become such an anomaly is because what our people are accustomed to hearing is the same type of substance that comes out of white evangelical pulpits. So it's white evangelical theology and blackface. This is what you see on most of the mainstream media networks that are featuring any Black preacher. The only way, like you have to pass the sniff test. And the sniff test is don't be too Black, don't be too radical, don't be too conscious. Okay? So I think that was the tough sell. One of the books that come to mind for me that I was citing throughout those sections in my book is Mark Chapman, another frat brother of ours, by the way, Christianity on Trial. So during the Black Power movement, Dr. Haynes, you know this as well as anybody, the indictment on the Black church was it's the white man's religion. So what Kleeg is engaged in, what I'm trying to prod our colleagues to consider is a reconstitution of your congregation. It's not much different than when Jesus says, you have heard it said thus and so.
Come on.
But I say.
Yes, sir.
Reconstitutive rhetoric. So Kleeg is saying, I know that the mainstream Christianity, or what he would call the slave religion, is saying thus and so. But what we need to say, or what I say, is that in order for us to embody the original manifestation of the religion, here, consider what Jesus was doing in this passage and how it's connected to this larger promise of God. And for anybody who wants to do a little bit of Bible on this, okay, the promise that is made to Abraham is that he would become a great nation, not a great daycare center. Not a great country club, a great nation. There's no way to get around the fact that nation is a political term. There's certain things that you need in order to establish a nation. It's a political term, right? So as Frank says, all theology is inherently rhetorical and theological. I say all theology is inherently political. So what I feel like Kleeg tries to get us to do, what I feel like was not necessarily happening within the mainstream of Christianity during the 60s or the civil rights and Black Power movement, and it's not happening now, is an honest conversation about the political nature of theology. Because all of us are doing some type of politics.
Yeah.
Now, even those who think they are being apolitical are only undergirding the political thrust of what we now would identify as white nationalist politics and white nationalist theology. So what we have to do is tackle it more head on if we're going to be, back to the term that I've been using a lot tonight, intentional about how we're going to constitute or reconstitute our congregation towards more of a Black liberationist posture.
Yeah, powerful, man. One of the things that Kleeg embodied and put into action was, well, preaching in action.
Yes.
Talk to us about preaching in action and how that can apply even in 2022.
Yeah, man, I did a whole lecture on this. Some of it was impromptu because it was just like on my heart and it wasn't flushed out. But by the time the moment came, I was with Bishop Frank M. Reed and the good people of the 11th District of the ME Church a couple of weeks ago. You know, it was their Founders Day and he wanted me to preach and do a lecture. And during the lecture, I talked some about, you know, that section where I opened up talking about Kleeg's preaching and action centers. These were the centers where he wanted to go, you know, in these spots around Michigan or ultimately spots around the region, spots around the country that would be like satellite shrines. Not in a way like it would be like his church in 10 locations, right? It would almost be like, you know what I think it might be like, Freddie? You could appreciate this, Doc. It would be like the Proctor Conference. You know what I'm saying? It was a place where the preachers could come, have their consciousness raised, be equipped with the tools to go out and engage in the work of Black liberation in their congregation and in their communities. So it was teaching them about what the role and the function of preaching is, not just from the pulpit platform, but, you know, Kleeg wrote regularly in the Michigan Chronicle, the Black newspaper. That's actually probably going to be my next book, is taking his, you know, weekly columns in that in that medium or other mediums that he was writing in, and take some of those. You know, those are preaching opportunities too. And he was talking about what it meant for us to be preaching, not just in ways that get people focused on, you know, the I guess you could say moralistic platitudes, you know, but the ways in which you ignite people. Like I say it this way, you know, you're not just saying, rhetoric is when you understand you're not just saying something, you're doing something with what you're saying. So the purpose and the function of our preaching shouldn't just be to get people to shout. Okay, it's good. I'm not, you know, I'm a fan of the shout. I am clear that Henry H. Mitchell was right. You know, the elder and venerable ancestor, he's right. Okay, so it should be a role of celebration. However, what are our people motivated and inspired to do after the church service?
There it is.
So that's what I think he was trying to establish, preaching in action centers that would have been like satellite shrines throughout the country, so that you could build more of a network of movement ministers, that we might call them that, movement ministers. Yeah,
and how powerful that is, man. That concept is something, like you said, the Proctor Conference, I'm convinced that's a part of the vision of Dr. Ivor Carruthers, Dr. Jeremiah Wright Jr. And so I want to kind of continue this whole concept, because the more I read, you know, your book, the more I went back and revisited Black Messiah, it made me think afresh. Kleeg and this age, Trayvon Martin to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, you know, we call the roll, and of course the movement for Black lives. That, unfortunately, you know, one of the, you know, narratives around the movement for Black lives has been the absence of Black faith and the Black church. What does Kleeg say? What would Kleeg say first to the Black church today during this age, and how would he be received in that context of the movement for Black lives, and what does his ministry say?
So the latter question, I think, is much more complicated. I'm not sure exactly how he would be received because, in some spaces, even those of us with the most credentials and street cred tend to have to navigate that space in a way that we can be authentically ourselves and still be allies to the movement. And sometimes you just have to step away and say, okay, as it relates to this effort or this initiative or this organization, y'all got it. I'll catch y'all on the rebound or I'll catch y'all out on the battlefield.
Real talk.
I don't know exactly how he would be received. Then a light-skinned Negro too? No.
Oh, man. Yeah, real.
I don't know. But what you are describing insofar as like how he would be speaking to the church, that is exactly an epistle to Stokely, the sermon, where he is saying to the congregation, we should be the place that embraces these revolutionaries. What Kleeg wanted to do, among other things, was literally ordain the Black revolutionaries to give them religious cover and protection from being drafted into the war by the government. He felt like they were being targeted. So he's like, hey, here's one way. I understand you ain't too fond of church, right? So this is what we would be saying. And in some ways, Freddie, Doc, I think both of us have had conversations with people out in the street, and even with me and you having conversations about conversations we've had with people out in the street that echo something along this wise. It's like, hey, I know you ain't really coming to church regularly and all of that, but here's some of the things that I feel like the church can provide, which would be a benefit to the movement. And here's some of the things I think the movement can provide that would be a benefit to the church. I think that's the conversation Kleeg was trying to force. And I think it happened in some ways and in some spaces and in some iterations. And I think it has begun to happen again. And I think it needs to happen more intentionally, because if the movement is going to be sustained in longevity, it has to be housed at an institutional base. Kleeg's argument, the same as yours and mine, as many others, is that there is no other place with the level of Black autonomy that the Black church has in the Black community. Now, if we can see, because the people who criticize the churches are right, based upon what we said earlier, right? Because if our churches are not constituted or reconstituted to accept and embrace and endorse and affirm and compliment those that are out there on the front lines doing that work, then it won't sustain the movement anyway. But if we can reconstitute it and even redirect some of our programs and our practices, I think we can see. I actually wrote about this for the Georgetown Berkeley Forum. They actually published it on their website on January 6th of this year. And I called it A Match Made in Heaven, Black Liberation Theology and the Movement for Black Lives. And I talked about how most of the folks in Black churches and even in the movement don't know anything about Black theology. They're talking bad about the church, and most of the criticism is legitimate, but they're not even considering the Freddie Haynes of the world, the Jeremiah Wrights of the world. I don't want to call too many names, I'll forget some. But those preachers who fit within that particular paradigm, they're not talking about us, or else they'll be like, man, them churches, them preachers ain't doing that. Not you, Pastor Earle, that type of stuff.
Right.
So I think it's a necessary conversation, because there has to be more intentionality around the partnership, and there's going to have to be some give and take on both sides. So I don't know exactly where or how Kleeg would be embraced, maybe the same way you and I have been embraced.
I mean, that's a great point, Doc. That's a great point. So speaking of, his interaction with, the Black Power movement of his, or the Black Lives Matter movement of his day, you intentionally chose 3 sermons. One became my favorite through the years, that letter to Stokely, just a powerful epistle. Why did you choose the 3 that you chose? Because again, as you said, from jump, you started looking at, a lot more than that, but you ended up and you broke it down to 3. Why these 3 out of the 20-odd sermons that, again, all are absolutely powerful and amazing? Why these 3 sermons did you choose to break down? And talk to us about how those sermons still speak to us today.
Yeah, man, there's a couple things I want to say about that, and I want to try to say it as concisely as possible. Earlier, and I think this is important, you asked me about why Kleeg might not be in the mainstream. Let's be honest. As people who have studied preaching and homiletics, Kleeg ain't no homiletician, okay?
Okay.
I mean, the brother will take a text and preach 14 other texts, right? And all over that other stuff before he come back. You got, what did he even pick this text for, right? But the content is still so captivating, right? So it's not, on the one hand, I was intrigued by that sermonic form. So that's part of it. Like those particular sermons have the sermonic form that makes me kind of search for the homiletical pattern, right? So it's not the traditional framework. That's one thing. But more importantly, I do cite this in the book too. These are figures, Malcolm X, Martin King, Stokely Carmichael, that represent a much wider section of the Black community, Black revolutionaries, Black faith leaders. And I wanted to give people a chance to consider what Kleeg was saying to them then, and to echo what I feel like you've been pitching and lobbying, and I've been trying to dunk it, what that means for today. When I entered the PhD program, Doc, it was August of 2014. I literally started the program, and Mike Brown is killed the same month.
Yeah.
And I was so caught up in that whirlwind of activism of what was happening here in Memphis that I could not disconnect. And so I had to integrate what I was involved in from the social justice standpoint and the activism, scholastically in the classroom, and sermonically on Sundays.
Good.
So it was literally like what I was living out. I recall when I got my PhD and the church did this program for me to honor me, and Andre Johnson was there. Andre would be going through, Earle organized this group, and Earle helped at this demonstration, and Earle did this, and Earle was writing in this paper while working on the PhD. You know, and so like all of that stuff was there, and these were the figures that I feel like were speaking the most to exactly where I was and what I was going through while I was in the program.
Wow, wow. Y'all, we are talking to the Dr. Earle Fisher, pastor, prophet, professor, penman, Great Abyssinia Baptist Church there in Memphis, Tennessee, blackest church in Memphis, blackest church in Tennessee, just black, blackety, black, and proud of it. And what a prophet. Again, here's the book, the Reverend Albert Kleeg Jr. and the Black Prophetic Tradition. Listen, it's a must read. I am begging you, if you are in church leadership, if you are a pastor, a preacher, a teacher, you've got to get this book, okay? It is a book that will bless you. Again, we've got to reconstitute this thing. As far as I'm concerned, Earle, this empire called America, democracy is in intensive care. The empire is about to reach its expiration date unless there is a transformation, a change that takes place. And I'm convinced that through Black liberation theology, through the mindset, the ministry of an Albert Kleeg Jr. and an Earle Fisher, we can rescue a country that's determined to commit suicide. I got to ask you this, Doc. I got to ask you this because you walk in it proudly and powerfully. Of course, the book is Reverend Albert Kleeg Jr. and the Black Prophetic Tradition. Please, before you leave us, give us a word. What is the Black Prophetic Tradition? Because there's a Black preaching tradition, but you're basically saying there's a little something different here. The Black Prophetic Tradition. Tell us about it.
It is, and I also have to specify, I think I do this in the book, I may do it in one of my other essays, that generally there has been an understanding of the African-American preaching tradition. And from my vantage point, that focuses so much on Americanity that sometimes we miss the Africanity. The African roots of the African-American, prophetic tradition. So I try to anchor my rhetorical analysis and religious posture in the Black prophetic tradition, let people know that there are Black people who existed before our elders and ancestors were enslaved by Europe that engage in prophetic rhetoric and prophetic discourse. I talk about in the book how our other frat brother, Lord, the alphas are representing up in this
alphas are representing.
Dr. Cornell West talks about pareisesia or bold and frank speech,
Right.
somehow originating with Socrates and Plato. I'm like, no, sir. You had 8th century prophets. This is well before 300, AD, right? 8th century prophets, Black folks, in Northeastern Africa, engaging in prophetic rhetoric. So here's what I feel like people need to recognize as my contribution to the notion of Black prophetic rhetoric. So this is not just speaking truth to power, okay? Mm-hmm. And it's surely not just the social consciousness of running off a list of social ills or running down the names of people who were killed by the police officers. You know, Freddie, how folks would do that in a sermon, and now they say, I'm being prophetic, Doc, let me be prophetic. Yeah. Okay, so it's not just speaking truth to power, it's speaking truth with power.
Come on.
And seeking to empower those who have been rendered powerless.
Powerless, yeah.
That's what the Black prophetic tradition does. It doesn't just speak truth to power. It is people who are speaking truth with power, seeking to empower those who have been rendered powerless. That's the best of the Black prophetic tradition.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Y'all, we are blessed. And Earle, we got to get you to Dallas when all this stuff is safe. You know, we're in Texas, where our governor is a joke.
Oh, you can cuss on here? No, I'm just playing.
But our governor's a joke. And so we're trying to, get things right and tight. But, man, we're so glad that God has touched your mind, heart, and spirit, and you have us at heart and on your mind and all in your spirit. And so thank you so much for your ministry. Thank you so much for your brilliance. And thank you so much for this powerful book, Reverend Albert Kleeg Jr. and the Black Prophetic Tradition. Y'all get it? Where can we get it, Earle? Where can we get the book?
So it is available on Amazon and some of the other sites that would enrich white people. I actually put a link in the comments section where people can get it for a discount. You can go through me and get it for a discount, and we'll get it shipped out to you. It might take you longer, but definitely be worth it, and definitely won't line Jeff Bezos' billionaire pockets, okay?
Right. Yeah, please. I think, and it's worth it because, again, we can't talk Black power while empowering white people. So please, I thank you for doing that, because that's going to help us as we, again, get enlightened by this rich, empowering, edifying knowledge. Man,
please let me thank you again, and thank the good people of the Friendship West Baptist Church, and not just for this platform and this opportunity. I'm serious, man. Your public witness, brother, yours individually and the churches as a whole, has been so refreshing, so affirming for those of us in Memphis and beyond. Thank you for inviting me and including me in this list of wonderful scholars and preachers and elders and wonderful persons that you know. Out of all of the folks who I know you know a million of them. I don't take it lightly that you provided the younger alpha between the two of us with the opportunity to talk about this. Fab Five Freddie, you my guy. I appreciate you, brother. Yeah.
Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work you're doing. And with Friendship West, we got a Memphis sister here on staff, our pastor of social justice, Pastor Danielle Ayers.
What up, Sarah?
Shout out to her.
Yeah, salute to her.
All right, bro. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much. Listen, I know you've been blessed by this evening. What a powerful exchange we've had listening to the brilliant prophetic witness of Dr. Earle Fisher through his powerful book about the Black prophetic tradition and Reverend Albert Kleeg Jr. Listen, you've tuned in. I know it's not accidental. You've been edified, you've been blessed, and perhaps you're saying, hey, I need this Jesus, this radical Jesus, this Jesus who empowers, emancipates, liberates, this Jesus who was marginalized himself and yet brings us into the mainstream of God's will. Listen, you want to know this radical Jesus? We offer him to you. Dial that number 469-498-0210. Please do that. Do it right now. We have prayer warriors who will minister to you. Tonight's a mighty good night to get to know this radical Jesus, this wonderful Jesus, this Jesus who is our Lord, lover, and liberator. Get to know him. Get to know him tonight. And perhaps you're saying, hey, church like this, I want to be a part of a church like this. We'd love to have you. I'd love to serve as your pastor. We'd love to have you as a part of our church family. So go ahead, dial that number, 469-498-0210. Welcome to Friendship West. Welcome home. Dial that number. Do it right now. God bless you. It's offering time. It's time to give generously, lovingly, liberally. You know how good God has been to you. So go ahead right now. Be a blessing since you have been blessed, since you are blessed. All you got to do is, you see the QR code right there, scan it, and you can give through that safe vehicle. You can text to give, 972-200-9419. Text FWBC to that number, and you can give through that vehicle. There's the Givelify app. Download the Givelify app, search out Friendship West, and of course, that's a safe vehicle. You can give online, friendshipwest.org, or through our FWBC app. Those are ways to give. And of course, you know, you can bring it Sunday. You can bring it Sunday because we are back. We back. That's what Chris Norman texted me on Sunday morning. He said 2 words, we back. And y'all, it was so moving. It was so good to see you. So please, we are excited about Palm Sunday, a high and holy day on the Christian calendar. And so we look forward to you being a part of the worship experience this coming Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. God is so good. It was so good to see you. And then let me just remind you of the fact that on Friday and Saturday, right before Easter Sunday, the Black Academy of Arts and Letters, there is going to be a powerful piece that basically was written and directed by the Curtis King. It's called The Death of Jesus. And 5 churches have come together. Antioch Baptist Church, West Side Church, St. John Unleashed, and Concord Church. And you see her right in the middle. She better be in the middle. Dr. Michelle McGee Northfleet representing Friendship West. It's going to be powerful, y'all. So please go ahead and get your tickets Friday, April 15th at 7 p.m. Saturday, there's a 2 p.m. matinee show and a 7 p.m. show on Saturday. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Again, 5 churches coming together. We need to make sure Friendship West represents, okay? Open seating, $15 on the floor, $10 on the balcony. I'm going to be there. I want to see you there, okay? And then we'll blow it up on that Easter Resurrection Sunday because God is good. 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12:30. It's going to be fire. So I can't wait to see you, and I look forward to what God will be doing. Please have an amazing, restful evening. A blessed day on tomorrow. Receive God's benediction. The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord cause God's face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up the light of God's countenance upon you and grant you peace. Go now in the power of God's Holy Spirit, living in the radical power of that Black Messiah, Jesus the Christ. In Jesus' name. Deuces.
We praise God for this impactful experience and for your joining us during it. Check us out on social media, and please like, share, and subscribe at Friendship West. Then go to www.friendshipwest.org to find out more about this marvelous movement. Find out how to participate through sharing your prayers, sharing your offerings or monetary gifts, or sharing and investing your time volunteering with this difference-making ministry. For you who are viewing as visitors, you can share that you were here by taking time to text FWVIZ to the number 28950. For those who want this time that you are visiting to be the last time that you're a visitor, you can become part of our fabulous family of faith, either by calling 469-498-0210 or by emailing join us at friendshipwest.org with your first name, your last name, and your cell number. Either way, we look forward to hearing from you. We're so excited that you are here. Until next time, blessings on you.
West Baptist Church. Come experience.